Yes, we are just making sure that everything is up and running. Hello, hello, peace lovers and peacemakers. This is Sara Jamshidi. Welcome to Peace Mindedly, a program where we feature peaceful bridge makers. Here with Matin Rokhsefat, we want to welcome you to our program. So, you know that we are live streaming our program every Tuesday at 12 noon on many social media channels on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Periscope, and other social media. And then you know that the initiative that we've taken on, special with Peace Mindedly, is peace journalism. So how to frame stories in a way that to be constructive and more meaningful stories for the audience that we hope to reach out. For that matter, if you share the same program on your timeline, you are helping us out with our Peace Journalism initiative. So today's conversation particularly is an important conversation for me. The reason is a particular reason. So some of you know that probably if you've been hearing our show or watching our show, you know that I'm from Iran. And then before I left Iran, basically I forced to leave Iran. I was working for Zan newspaper. Zan in Farsi means woman, and then Zan newspaper was one of the was the only, it's not one of the, was the first and only daily periodicals, a newspaper who was published for women, by women, about women. It was a newspaper, daily paper in Iran, a Muslim nation, and we were basically covering stories of women in the region, which was Middle East, and also women, Muslim women around the world. And for that matter, we were so proud of the work that we were doing. And then honestly, almost all the major network channels and media channels were covering us. I mean, people, networks like CNN, MSNBC, the Reuters, Associated Press, and name it, Al Sharq al Wasat, many. By the time Al Jazeera was not didn't exist, and many newspapers and delegates basically were coming in and out of the newsroom, just fascinated by the work we were doing in that particular newsroom. The leader of the newspaper was Faiza Hashemi Rafsanjani, daughter of the former reformist president of Iran. So much was going on in Iran in terms of covering women leadership, Muslim women leadership in many spheres, in politics, in social, in economy, in many areas. And then what happens was, when I emigrated to the United States, unbelievably, something was happening that I could not comprehend. Almost anyone who knew I was from Iran was asking one particular question, and it was before nuclear program. After nuclear program, I ended up getting two questions, but before then, it was one question, and that one question was about women appearance and about women oppression. And I was so, I mean, I couldn't believe that there's only one question people are asking me. And at the end, the verdict was always, okay, so how pitiful you are in the Muslim nations. And that really bothered me. So I had to go through extended answers for those who really wanted to listen to the answer, explaining, okay, no, it was not the case, this happened, and the Middle East is like that, and the Muslim women are like that, and so forth and so on. So then I was just going through lots of explanation, and then you know what, I am so glad that we are in a space that things has been shifting and shifting by the work, the meaningful work of women who are putting forward. And one of those amazing women that we have in our program is our dear Professor Shahla Haeri. So I'm bringing Shahla into our studio. Shahla Haeri is an Associate Professor of Anthropology and a former director of the Women's Studies program at Boston University. Haeri is one of the pioneers of Iranian anthropology and has produced cutting edge studies of Iran, Pakistan, and the Muslim world. In her latest book, The Unforgettable Queens of Islam: Succession, Authority, Gender, Haeri looks at extraordinary lives of and legacy of a few Muslim women leaders and rulers in within different Muslim countries. And very welcome, Shahla, to our program.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, with your permission and with the tradition in our show, I call my guests with their first name. I know you are Dr. Haeri, but I'm going to call you Shahla.
That would be
Okay,
my pleasure.
excellent. Thank you so much. Shahla, tell us what is the story behind the book and why you decided you would like to write such an amazing book.
Well, thank you for having me, Sarah June. Uh, just like you know, I mean, I have been living in this country for a long time, and without fail, the question has been, why do all Muslim women have to wear a veil? I mean, as a teacher, as a professor, I'd be standing in front of my students unveiled, talking to them about amazing work that women are doing back there. And the next question I get, why do all Muslim women have to wear the veil? So one was just to challenge this whole assumption of, that first of all, every woman wears the veil. And second of all, that every woman who wears the veil is miserable, victimized, inferior, unagentic, and what have you. But what gave me specifically an idea to write about this book is continuation of my work on women, law, religion, and as an anthropologist, I'm always interested in how things work in everyday life. What are the practices of women? What are the experiences of women? Not just what the law says, but what the law does, and how do people use these laws as a way of making their lives meaningful, either to put up sometimes with oppression or other times to engage with it or challenge it or negate it. First of all, personally, I'm from a background, a family of very professional, educated women, independent women. My paternal grandmother was a wife of an Ayatollah, a well-known Ayatollah, who had 6 sons and 4 daughters. All these women were quite accomplished. I have tons of cousins. Many of them have PhDs. They're physicians, they're doctors, they're professors. As a matter of fact, my youngest sister is a professor. So, I was brought up within the family, within a milieu that encourages um, independent thinking and uh, being active in your professional life. But also specifically, I was interested when I went to Pakistan for the first time and I saw the election of Benazir Bhutto. I happened to be there when she got elected, and I had never seen anything like it. The amount of rose petals that were thrown on her motorcades, the way that she was treated by people, and that was very important. She was the first democratically elected woman prime minister in the Muslim world, and actually in the world at that time. Not very many people were like her. And then again, another event that happens was in early 2000 when I went back to Iran and I found out that there were these women who nominated themselves to run for the presidency in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it was absolutely zero news about them in the newspapers and media in the US.
So basically, Shahla, I don't want to interrupt you, but basically, we are talking about the personal life of someone who has had the wealth of women independence on her background. We are talking about witnessing women in political leadership. And then, yet again, we do not see any of those in the news.
Yes, absolutely. Or if we do, it's just buried in like page 10, not in page 1. I expected to read about these women who nominated themselves for presidency in Iran in the pages of New York Times. I read New York Times every day. Nothing about them, just a little news about just one woman running for the election.
Why
And
is that, you think?
it is just same assumptions, dominant assumptions that you just very rightly refer to at the beginning of your program. Because that dominant narrative about women on agency, women inferiority, women lack of engagement with their societies and with the political system, that just doesn't allow them to think beyond that narrative, that image they have of Muslim women.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you decided you are gonna contradict that kind of stereotype that we believe, and you wrote about queens of Islam. So it's 6 women. Tell me, how come you decided to pick these 6 women? Why?
That's a very good question. I'm often asked that question. You could choose a lot more, but you see, I didn't want to write a survey book. I didn't want to say like there are 10 queens. I wanted to give their extraordinary lives and legacies, write about them, the stories of these women. But specifically, the first 2 chapters of my book includes the story of the Queen of Sheba, which involves revelations in the Quran, Muslims' highest source of authority. And the second story in the book involves the life and legacy of Aisha, the beloved of Prophet Muhammad, one of the wives of Prophet Muhammad, known as the mother of the faithful, who got engaged in the act of succession. She was very active she had the courage of her convictions. She thought that whoever who succeeds the Prophet Muhammad should have certain qualities. Well, she supported some of her own cousins to run, or the in-laws, to run for to make them to become a successor to the Prophet Muhammad. So these 2 women, and of course, her defeat in the Battle of the Camel necessitated, it seems, that a tradition, a hadith that is allegedly attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, who said something to the effect of, if a country allows, or if a nation allows a woman to become a ruler, then it will not see any, salvations. So these 2 sources of authority, the revelations of the Queen of Sheba on the one hand, the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad on the other hand, at the intersection of these 2, I wanted to see, well, what happened, because historically we do have women who have become the queen. So I wanted to say, what other factors were involved? What other source of authority was involved that enabled this woman to come to power? And that was a father's support for his daughter. That patriarchal support is very important.
Do we have the same for? I don't know why it's echoes, but do we have the same for Sheba, Queen Sheba? Does her father supported? I think it did, according to what I read in the
Well,
book.
2 ways you can talk about it. To begin with, she was supported by God, right?
Aha.
God put her there. God gave her a mighty throne, Arsha Azim, right? So she was supported by none other than the highest source of authority, Almighty Allah. But the Muslim chroniclers and biographers have created a father for her, and they say that he happened to be a king of Yemen who married a jinn princess. He didn't marry a normal human being. He had to have a supernatural being, a jinn, so that the product of that marriage is a woman who is half supernatural. So her power, in other words, is not so legitimate because she was half from a woman who happened to be a jinn and a father who happened to be a king. So she did
And
have, whether you talk about it in legendary forms or in historical form.
excellent. So something is happening. Do you have the echo on your end? No, it's echo in my end. That's okay. So I hope that I can manage this. But so who are the other four women? So we have Queen Razia, we have Benazir Bhutto, we have two others. So tell me, who are the other four women?
Okay, so I was interested in a historical perspective and also a cross-cultural perspective. So for medieval period, I chose a woman from Yemen who happened to be an Ismaili Muslim, Queen Arwa, also known as Sayyida Hurra, the independent free lady. Um, and the second medieval woman is, as you mentioned, is Sultan Razia Sultan, or Queen of India in 13th century. Queen Arwa was at the end of, from 11th century to 12th century, beginning of 12th century, and she actually ruled for a long, long time, almost 71 years, some of which she was a queen consort, but effectively she was in control and power. For modern queens, I have Benazir Bhutto, as I said, because I have done work in Pakistan. I've written a book on Pakistan, and also the first and the only so far, well, not the only right now, but the most important president, head of the state in Indonesia, and that's Megawati Soekarno Putri of Indonesia.
Yes. And so here's the issue. When we have a woman as a political leader, do we gain, or what do we gain, or what do we lose in terms of a societal or economical perspective? Or I'm wondering, probably they have to put out a big fight to win over this phenomenon, the political phenomenon within their own country.
Well, when we're talking about medieval and modern times, we're talking about two different political systems.
Mm-hmm.
In medieval time, it was an autocratic system of political system. You had the king or the sultan or the caliph, you had the court. The royal court was the center of all activities. And women lived in the so-called harem. And there were many of them because these were polygynous. These were palaces where the sultan had several wives and many kids, many boys and many girls. So it depended on the relationship between a woman and her father, and also the absence of any competent male successor, right? So they had it easier times because their father recognized their talent and they showed their charisma. So, and once the father supported them, then unlike what many people may think, the religious elite, the religious establishment didn't make any objections. We have no documents, nothing, no news about whether or not the religious institution made any objections to these women's leadership, right? But when we come to modern times, with Benazir and Megawati specifically, about whom I have written, we're dealing with a system, a political system that is presumably democratic. We have institutions, we have constitutions that people have to vote, right? So Benazir Bhutto particularly was very much loved by her father. And of course, her father unfortunately got hanged and was overthrown. But she was thrown into jail. She was tortured, abused by General Zia for a long time, but eventually she was released. She went to London and she became the leader of her own party. And her mother, in that sense, was very supportive of her initially. And she came back. She ran for the office of the prime minister. And unlike what many people think, she had tremendous support. She has such a popular support that she actually won the election. Had it not been for the male politicians making a coalitions and also trying to actively recruit the religious parties to fight against Benazir, her vote in the parliament would have been a lot higher. So she had the support, the popular support. So did Megawati Sukarnoputri. So we have to understand the differences in the political system.
Yes, differences in political system. But here is, as I'm listening to you, at the beginning of the program, I was giving example of Faiza Hashemi Rafsanjani. And as I'm listening to you, there is the same parallels that's running within their own family, because Hashemi Rafsanjani had about, I think, 3 daughters or 4. And then Faiza among them was the bravest, the most fearless, and then supported by the father, and was able to do so many things, especially in favor of women back in Tehran. So I'm listening that their father's support has been significant. If there was no support, there was no improvement in within further status.
And that is so smart of you. I mean, so perceptive to make the parallels and to draw the parallels between Faiza. And I agree with you. Faiza had other sisters, but none of them were as charismatic as Faiza was, right? But she had the support of an interesting patriarch, right? So that was very important. And that's what we need to understand. All these women who get into positions of power are from the upper classes. They're from feudal background, they're from the royal families. It's, for men, it's a little different thing. Some men could actually come to power, particularly in the older days in feudal societies, and they could fight against any of the contenders to the throne and win the throne the crown by force. For women, this didn't happen for women. What source of authority that enabled women to get into power, to create a platform for their authority, was in fact the father. So that's what I call, initially I had called it the patriarchal paradox, but it's really not patriarchal paradox. It's a pragmatism of patriarchy that realizes how it can just be, fluid in terms of supporting someone whose authority, in fact, is higher than the other ones.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm sorry, I have this problem with my microphone, so just bear with me. So drawing a parallel again here against my own life, I always say that my dad was the first feminist I know. Because he just supported me, my sister, and women in the family. And then I think it's exactly to the point that you are making. But do we need to have men who are in favor of women's rights and women's movements, so then we can see more women in power?
Well, you see, the structure of power is such that it is controlled by men, right? So, in order for women to get into those positions of powers, they do need to have male support, and many women do. As we just mentioned, you mentioned about your father, my father, and I mentioned about my grandfather, who was an Ayatollah who never told us that we should cover our hair. So he was quite an enlightened Ayatollah. We all, his daughters traveled to Europe, and so did we. But it is important. We live in now, of course, in this day and age, we live in a society that it has laws, regulations, institutions. Of course, up until now, in most countries, these institutions, the laws have been to women's disfavor. So for women to get into the positions of power, they need to have male allies, and their brothers, their husbands, their fathers, their sons could be very important and influential in terms of helping them to get into positions of power.
Excellent. So, in your opinion, from the studies that you've done, so we need to have probably men who are more in favor of women. And then what else do we need to see the changes in women political leadership?
Very good. Sustain women's activity and collective activities, because not all women think the same way, not all women desire the same thing, not all women have the same objectives, right? Let's take what's happening in the US right now. We are confronted with a woman who was just nominated to, or just voted in to become a Supreme Court justice. Now, many women are worried about what may happen to the rights that women have gained in terms of abortion, because many people are against abortion in this country, right? So we don't know how the laws, and the laws are always there to allow certain things or not allow other things, to criminalize certain behavior or to make other behaviors acceptable. So I think it is important for women, again, understanding that women is not do not constitute a monolithic category, but for women to really gain a more democratic society, a more egalitarian society, is to find common cause with each other, with other women, and common cause with other men, men in power, men in their relatives and kins, and systematically work for a better and more egalitarian, equitable society,
Uh,
democratic.
Absolutely. So as we were just explaining, not only we need men who are just gearing towards in favor of women for women leadership. We also need women who are supporting women causes. So
But yeah,
here I have a very interesting story that I would like to share with you, and I know that you relate to this story more than anyone else. Back in Tehran, many people were just very agitated about having a cleric president at the office, and then they were just huge discussion about having non-cleric president in the office. And then we had Ahmadinejad, and we saw that what Ahmadinejad did is just made a mess
absolutely.
in the country. And then later on in the argument within the public and in the political leadership, uh, sort of a elite political leadership was, I mean, what did we wish for? I wish we wouldn't lie. I mean, we wouldn't dare to have a non-clerical president, because non-clerical came into the power and just was a very, very bad idea. And probably, at least in my own opinion, is the same with women who are not supporting women causes. If we have women who are just so against uh, women cause at the high office, so we are just gonna create a mess, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. You're very right. In terms of um, leadership or our leaders, particularly we're talking about Iran now, being a man of robe, a cleric, or a so-called secular, or not so much secular, but more of a Western type clothes. But look, Mr. Khatami's era presidency was really one of the most interesting time that Iran could have achieved what it had hoped to achieve. Uh, he was enlightened. He was a very interesting man, and he was elected by a huge, huge number of people. Unfortunately, he got caught into a system that tried to render him useless, and he didn't, or some say he couldn't use or utilize the support that people had given him. Now he had the people power behind him, but he got caught into this weird political system that we now have in Iran, and was unable to deliver. And his leadership, his presidency, led into huge disappointment on the part of people, and the election of Mr. Ahmadinejad, which, as you said, left a huge mess behind.
Do you think in again, I have a problem with my mic. I mean, I'm just going to fix it momentarily. But would you think that we may have a female president in Iran by any chance?
Sure, why not? I mean, I have made this. I mean, we should never think that these things are far fetched. If women cannot become into power, it's not that women are incapable of. it's because of the laws that prevent them for whatever reason. The laws are supported by the nature of men and women, the divine laws and all that. And all of that are made up by people who have been in power. When I made my video documentary on women who had nominated themselves as a presidential candidates in Iran in 2001, these women were just extraordinary. I mean, you could disagree with their platform and their policies, but they had self-confidence. They had the conviction about what they can do. And without exceptions, there were 6 of them that I interviewed. They said, why can't I become the president of a country like Iran? In fact, one of them, whom I was just going to mention at the beginning of our conversation, was this woman who had, was tightly veiled, but very impressive woman. And she was so well versed in the Quran and the tradition of Prophet Muhammad. She supported all her ideas by hadith or, revelations. And she made a reference to the Queen of Sheba. She said, we have in the Quran a woman who was supported, who was a sovereign. And that's very important for us. Why can't we become like her? So,
Yes, so
yes.
maybe there is a chance here for us, huh?
Right. I mean, just a few weeks ago, the Guardian Council said that, women can run for president. But that is silly because women have challenged this very same Article 115 of Iranian Constitution, that says who can or cannot become a president. It says nothing about women cannot becoming president. What it does use is the word rejal siyasi, political elite. And the first person who challenged this law was Khanum Azam Taleghani in 1996, who said, we are a member of this, political elite. So why can't I run for president? So now, this is the cheap publicity. The Guardian Council says, yeah, women can. Before they tried to keep it hush hush, but now they say can, but doesn't change any of the dynamics, the power dynamics, I mean.
Excellent. So, Shahla, I am just going to see how I can take care of my microphone. There is an issue in my microphone, but stay put with me. I'm going to come back and see how I can fix this one. Stay put, please. You are listening to Peace Mindedly. There is a chance that you're also watching Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. So we are in our houses. I am in my house and everyone else in their houses because of the pandemic. And sometimes they are some unexpected things happen. It's just like today. For some reason, I'm speaking in my microphone, and there is an echo just so loud. I hope that I can take care of this with my machines here. If I don't, I need to refresh my page and come back. Don't go anywhere. I'm here. I'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes, but just bear with me. But for now, we are good. Hopefully that we stay good for the rest of the program. We are live streaming our conversation on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Periscope, and many social media channels. So if you would like to ask questions from our guest, please do so, because we feature your questions on our program. Also, write to us, editor@goldtone.com. We feature your questions here in the program. And then what's happening? Yes, we are on the second season for Peace Mindedly. Every Tuesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, we come here for talking with our guests about politics, about women leadership, about so many interesting subjects. The theme is always based on peace and how my guests are doing meaningful work to connect nations and cultures and people by being peaceful bridge makers. So our last program is going to be on November 24th, and we come back in February again every Tuesdays, again at 12 noon with new programs and new guests. For next episode, Matin is going to interview Jessica Gudo, author of After the Last Border, Two Families and the Story of Refuge in America. It's going to be an interesting interview because Matin is doing it, and second of all, we are on the day of the election. So by then, I'm hoping that you may have already casted your vote and you're just here comfortably sitting and listening to our show, or you are planning to do so. And please do that because it's an important election. So today I'm posting a personal story about how I basically galvanized and mobilized my whole family back in Tehran to take them to the poll stations and to have them to vote. I mean, it was about probably between 28 to 30 people, even more, that I would take them to the polls to vote. So vote is very important. We are deciding about the future of our political life on national level, and if it's the when it's the United States, we are deciding probably for the rest of the world. So this election is very important, and I'm hoping that we all cast our votes, inshallah. And after that, I'm talking with Sertaç Sehikoglu. You know, I speak Turkish. I supposed to pronounce the name much better than this, but there you go. When I'm doing it in English, so everything changes. But Sertaç is a researcher, and with Sertaç, we are going to talk about women desire in Turkey. So Sertaç has studied Turkish women quest to demand their rights for desire and pleasure. For that matter, women are working out to look attractive, to look fantastic, and then she is basically studied. She studied the phenomenon, and we are going to talk about how this new phenomenon is going on in the Muslim world. So desire, and for women to pay attention to their personal desires. For this hour, we are talking with Shahla Haeri, an Associate Professor of Anthropology and former Director of the Women's Studies Program at Boston University. Haeri has been studying Muslim women's lives within their social and political environments for quite some time. Law of desire, temporary marriage in Shia Iran, and No Shame for the Sun, Lives of Professional Pakistani Women are her other books. She also produced a video documentary, Mrs. President, Women and Political Leadership in Iran. She interviewed 6 women. So Shahla, it's running throughout a theme throughout your work. So it's 6 queens, 6 women, all the 6 ones. What's the magic behind 6?
I have no idea. I have been asked that question, and maybe it is a magic number. Maybe there is something mystical about it, but I really can't put my fingers on that. I can't
Okay,
articulate it.
I take your answer for that. Okay, so and then for this book, you are here's what's happening. You're studying the challenges that women are facing within their respected countries, and then we are talking about Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. We are talking about medieval women. We are talking about modern women. I wonder, is there any are there similarities between these women leaders that you have studied?
Excellent question. Well, there are more similarities, let's say, among the modern queens or modern leaders than among the medieval ones. Well, to begin with, as we have been just talking, the most important theme that runs through this chapter is father-daughter relationship. So in that sense, they all share that relationship. They are from very prominent families. They have an excellent relations with their fathers. The fathers are national heroes, like Sukarno in Indonesia, Zulfikar Bhutto in Pakistan, or Iltutmish um, in uh, in India in early 12th, 13th century. So that relationship is very important. But another common factors among them is their charisma, their personal ambitions and charisma. They are ambitious women. They want to be active, and they have certain ideas about how things ought to run. Queen Arwa of Yemen was a very a powerful, wise, uh, astute woman who was running at the time when in northern Africa, North Africa, in Egypt particularly, the Fatimid, the Ismaili Fatimid dynasty, were in power, and they were one of the most powerful dynasties at the time, competing with the Abbasid dynasty in Baghdad. But so she was in Yemen, but she was a follower of the Ismailis, and she managed to keep them at an arm's length, but at the same time being very diplomatic in her relationship with them. So I think um, they're important uh, qualities that these women had: their ambitions, their um, their charisma, but also they had a good acumen. They seemed to know how to deal, how to engage with the structures of power, with other powerful men, with the military, with the religious elite. Not that everybody was supportive of them, but they realized that they have to make alliances. They need to have networks of support and alliances. And they
Do
managed.
you Excellent. Do you have a story of any of these women leaders that you could share with us?
Ooh, there are so many stories. Well, the most fascinating story is that of the Queen of Sheba.
Hmm.
That's more legendary, and I hope people would go and read it because she is popular among all religions, including not only she's not only popular among the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, but also in Ethiopia, because in Ethiopia uh, one of the legends or the historical assumptions is that the ruling dynasty was descendant from Solomon, from Jerusalem. Um, Benazir, I think it's really an extraordinary person in terms of her dedication to her people. I looked at her life more through a mystical angle, like the characters, the mystical, legendary Sufi characters in Pakistan. What is interesting in Pakistan as opposed to Iran is that in a mystical tradition, it's the woman who is a seeker. It's the woman who goes on a journey to find her beloved and to become united with the beloved. Unlike in Iran, mostly it's the man who goes um, on a quest. She really did seem to have this um, unwavering love for her people. She wanted to go back. She knew of all the problems that were on her way, but then she persisted. She went there, and unfortunately, she got killed.
I covered Benazir Bhutto. I know that she loved Pakistan. I mean, great respect for the people, great respect for the country and for the culture and for everything. But since we are talking about charisma, we're talking about powerful women, wouldn't be fair to assume that they also loved power?
Oh, sure.
Benazir,
If
yeah.
you didn't have that, I mean, power is an endemic, essential part of any relationship. Anybody, two sisters, parents, teachers, people have. I mean, power is embedded in the relationships. Now, how you operationalize power and then you gain authority is something else. Not everybody has that. So Benazir, yes, of course. I mean, she competed with her brother. Of course, her brother, older brother, competed with her. Of course, they did. One of the objectives they have is that they want to maintain their power and extend their power base or consolidate their power base. All of them. Queen Erwa in Yemen, she was a very powerful person, and she was very authoritative, and she managed to avenge her father-in-law who was badly beheaded. She did the same thing of the tribal leader who had killed her father-in-law. She had no pity. So yes, if this, of course they want, but power, as I said, is embedded in our relationships. Everybody has that, but what you do with it is a different matter.
Exactly. What you do with it, it's the matter. But here's the issue: if it was not for the magic number 6, Who else would you include in your women leaders and in your queens?
Very good question. Immediately, I would say, and I intended initially to do the two prime ministers of Bangladesh. Very interesting case. It's a little different from what I have argued in my book because those two women initially had a patriarchal support. Sheikh Hasina had her father's support. Khaleda Zia had her husband's support. But sometimes it is the husband, not always it's the father. And then after that initial support that they got, but now the power goes back and forth between the two ladies, right? So they would be very important people. But I would also like to look into Africa. One of the things we neglect to do, and I really would have liked to do it, and I didn't get a chance to do it because I had limited time and limited number, to look into Africa. Of course, the Queen concerts in Africa have been very powerful. In Mali, Mansa Musa, it's one of the most powerful, the richest person on earth at the time. So his wife was very powerful. Many other women were powerful. In Senegal, a few years ago, there was a woman prime minister who I believe later on became a president or maybe prime minister for a year or so, not too long. So it is important to be a lot more inclusive. But, I would have liked to include someone from Africa.
Yes, yes, for sure. Okay, the Unforgettable Queens of Islam. We are basically talking about these queens, and you depicted these six powerful women in this book, and they are fascinating stories of each and every single woman. But yet again, I think it's the book is written. It's a scholarly book. It's for academia. Yet again, it's a kind of book that you read and you enjoy. You enjoy of the storyline. You enjoy of the history behind the book. And I just enjoyed, just learning in depth about some of these women that you picked. But in your opinion, why do you think that we should read this book?
Oh, very good question. That's an excellent question. First of all, I'm very happy you enjoyed, read it and you enjoyed it. In fact, that's what I say in my book, that I want to write this book for a wider audience. Of course, I'm a professor, I teach, I have to satisfy my colleagues too, who would then say, oh, this is just a popular book. But I try to strike a balance between the two perspectives or the two objectives that I have. But also, one of the reasons I kept the number minimal and happened to be six was to really write in depth about what these women did, not just quick story about them. I wanted to look at them differently. About every single one of these women, books have been written. So to write one chapter is really not enough, but I wanted to at least have that sense of telling the stories of these women. And what was the second part of your question?
So yeah, it was about why do we need to read this book. But
Ah,
here's do you think would you like to continue, or I can go to my next
and let
question?
me just say why I think it is important to have this book, because as I mentioned, in fact, in my conclusion in the book, that every time I talked about women queens or women leaders, in this country, of course, even sometimes to Pakistanis, to Iranians, and they said, what? Were there any women leaders? And so, we need to know our history. And many women were very powerful in their communities, as I mentioned, like my paternal grandmother, but nothing is written about them. And the assumption is that, as we talked at the beginning of the program, that these women are, inferior, they are passive, they are secluded. The assumption is that if they wear the veil, they lose their brain. And these women are, quite active and powerful women. So I wanted people to realize, to have another picture of Muslim women. I mean, women behind the throne have always had powers, but I wanted to talk about those women who are in the position of power, who are wearing the crown, so to speak, who sit on the throne. So I think it is important to, particularly for us Muslims, to be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. So the issue is, again, it's my microphone again. I apologize. It's just something is really bothering me on my end. But as we explain it throughout the program, at the beginning of the program and throughout the program, that there are many examples of powerful Muslim women. You are talking about that, and as I explained at the beginning of the program, Zan newspaper, we were writing about that. But the reason that we are not hearing or hearing is or seeing is because has not been talked about. So what do you think media needs to do? What changes would you like to see in media so then we see more examples of women, Muslim women leaders?
Well, to begin with, I'm very happy to see you. You're doing precisely that to introduce another vision of women. You and Martina are doing excellent work. So thank you both so very much. Um, I think by and large, this society, people are becoming a lot more aware of um, the the warped image they have had of Muslim women. It might still be propagated by Fox News, shall we say, but we have Ilhan Omar, wears beautiful scarf, and she is so sharp and smart. We have Rashida Talib. These are more women who have become visible and vocal. But there are tons of women like them, like, as I mentioned yourselves. So the point of it is to constantly be vigilant and talk about that and do not allow such image of women to form the dominant narrative in this country. Another thing we need to do also is, unfortunately, as um, some Muslim societies are becoming more and more caught in the grips of, shall we say, fundamentalism or Islamist, and there is a backlash against women who are becoming more vocal, visible, active, engaged, professional. So we need, we seem to be in a hard rock, between a hard rock and a wall, or whatever the expression is. So we need to be aware of these dualities and not to give in to one or to be cowed by the other one. The unfortunate part is that America has the bullhorn, so it still has the biggest uh, platform to talk about or to propagate this idea. But Muslim women are challenging that, and the future is bright. As I said,
Excellent.
look at yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, but it's an excellent point here. So, yet my microphone is adjusting. Excellent segment that you just made right now, and that is about the Muslim women in the U.S. So we see that at least here's I give you an example. So about 12 years, not 12 years ago, but 8 9 years ago, when I was putting Muslim women on Google and hit the image on the Google page was all the dark women, a niqab, a burqa, cover, blah blah, ugly, so unhappy, just so sad women. And now that I just, for the sake of practice, I did the same thing again yesterday. I put Muslim women, and the pictures were different. The pictures were, of course, they were veil, and they were sometimes niqab, sometimes burqa, but there was also happy women, very stylish women with a hijab or with a scarf, and it was the picture was different. So I'm seeing that things are changing, the narrative is changing. And then because of the work of the Muslim women like yourself and other scholars that putting forward, and Muslim women activism, things has changed. But how about in the political leadership? I think that still Islamophobia is a real issue in the United States.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And here is again, speaking of the unforgettable queens of Islam, leadership matters. Leadership is very important. The role of leaders are very important. Just as we had very interesting women getting into the Congress in this country, including AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Talib. Ayanna Priestley here in my state, and Katie, I forgot her last name, in California, very, very interesting, smart women. So then you'll see the backlash against them is a lot stronger. You hear from our leaders, and some of the powerful media who are trying to malign them, particularly angry they are at powerful Muslim women. I mean, um, like an uppity, powerful Muslim woman is a lot more threatening, because it clearly challenges the stereotypes that is out there. So there is a lot that is out there, unfortunately. But as you said, it's very nice. You look at the images of Muslim women; it's a lot more diverse. It's a lot more colorful. Muslim women are taking the lead themselves. It's unfortunate that in places like Iran, or even in Pakistan, didn't used to be like that, or some other places in the Muslim countries, these kinds of stereotypes are reinforced, because the kind of women we get into the parliament in Iran, for example, I mean, some might be more independent than others, but none really stands for women's rights. And in many of these societies, the the leaders, the powers, try to reinforce the idea of veiling for women, and unfortunately, women who get into the positions or allowed to get into the positions, support that idea. I don't think necessarily there's anything wrong with wearing a veil if you choose to do that. So, but forced veiling, it's a problem. And anytime you force the group of people to relinquish their rights, if they don't want to do that, that is oppression. That is domination. So I do not support that. But hopefully, we'll get to have more women, Muslim women, to get elected into the Congress in this country.
Yes, hopefully. And then we are going, I'm all about good fight, and then we are going, hopefully we are engaging in a good fight. Stay with me, Shahla. Yes, it's one issue here on my end, on my microphone, that I couldn't take care of. That one of my fears was I refresh my page and then I just mess up with everything on my end. So therefore I'm just bearing with the issue. If you are hearing lots of echo and background, it's because something is going on here that I couldn't fix it during the program. But we are moving forward, because this is what we do. It's issues happen, and then we try to do our best. For this hour, we are talking with Shahla Haeri, professor of anthropology at Boston University and author of Unforgettable Queens of Islam: Succession, Authority, and Gender. I do have the book here with me. So again, it's if you are Unforgettable Queens of Islam, Succession, Authority, Gender, and it's a good read for Muslim and non-Muslim, for women and men, for those who are seeking to learn more about some of these Muslim women leaders. So it's a good read. You can purchase the book on goldtoon.com. We do have the book available on our website, and also the website is the book is on many online shopping platforms, so you can purchase the book that way. Please share our video on your timeline, because we are covering peace, we are talking about peace, and our initiative is peace journalism. We do appreciate your support. And yes, at the end of every program, I ask my guests to share something meaningful about peace, about kindness, and about compassion. We are going to have the echo problem, but I do my best. Just bear with me. At the end of every program, I ask my guests to share something meaningful about peace, kindness, and compassion. And I am going to Shahla to share her thoughts with us. And again, my apologies. It's the echo issue. You are not hearing it, but it's on my end. And then I try my best to take care of that. But here is your chance. Please tell us what you would like us to know about peace and kindness.
Well, the first thing, well, first of all, let me thank you and Mateen for doing such a fantastic job, and for asking good questions. Peace is very important. Humanity is very important. One of the first things that comes to my mind is a very famous poem by Sadi, Sheikh Sadi, the 13th century Iranian poet, philosopher, mystic, that says something like, and I'm going to say it in Persian first, and then I hope to translate that. Of course, you can never translate the beauty of a poem. It says, Bani Adam a'zای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش ز یک گوهرند. چو عضوی به درد آورد روزگار دگر عضوها را نماند قرار. تو که از مهنت دیگران بیغمی نشاید که نامت نهند آدمی. Basically, what it is saying, Sadi in 13th century, that the humanity is part of the same body. So when part of this body is hurt, the other parts are also in pain. And if you do not understand this pain of the humanities, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Bangladesh, what's happening in Iran, what's happening in this country, with the people who are suffering from hunger, from violence, the blacks and the browns and the Muslims in this country, then it's really not proper to call yourself a part of this humanities, a human. So I think Sheikh Sadi, the Iranian poet in the 13th century, said it best.
Excellent. So, Shahla, for a few seconds, we didn't have your voice. Can you please recite the Farsi version of the poem once again?
Sure. بنی آدم اعضای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش ز یک گوهرند. چو عضوی به درد آورد روزگار دگر عضوها را نماند قرار. تو که از مهنت دیگران بیغمی نشاید که نامت نهند آدمی.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
I really enjoyed the conversation. And the book was really amazing, and it was really enlightening talk because I'm a history. I have a history PhD in history, and this talk was again something that added to my knowledge. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate your program. I appreciated the time you have taken and all the good questions you ask. So good luck with that. Keep me informed, and I'd love to be in touch and look at more of your programs.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Khoda Hafiz.
Khoda Hafiz. Khoda Hafiz.
Khoda Hafiz.